Hello everybody on the second lesson. Today we are going to learn basics of building programs. So this lesson is really important in order to understand programming. Let's hide our manager on the left side because we don't need it right now. I will click view and manager. Okay. Now let's create a new file. Ctrl+Shift+N stands here for new. We have just created a file which is called the source code. Let's save it. Let's just add here .cpp. Remember about adding the cpp here because you might have problems compiling your programs in the code blocks if you don't add the cpp here, because the default option for saving is the C files, not the C++. So remember about adding that extension here. Okay, we are saving it, and now I will say something very important. We need to understand, we need to know, and always remember that when you write programs, we are doing it for our PC, exactly for our compiler, which will interpret things that we wrote. And we have to remember that our PC, without us, is very stupid. That's true, I am not lying. PC won't be able to guess anything if we make any errors. Computers are doing only that what we want them to do. We are sending them instructions and they have to do them. So if you make any errors while you are writing programs, remember that's only your fault, not the computer. So if you want to write programs well, we have to feel and think like a compiler. So since today we are going to be compilers. Okay, almost every program is going to be read by our compiler from the top to the bottom. So if I write here something like let's assume it's some kind of instructions, orders for computers, right? And we can read code from any place we want. We can jump from one line to another line. We don't need to read line by line, right? We don't need to do anything. It's up to us what we do. But that code will be read by the compiler from the top to the bottom, line by line, okay? And why I'm saying this? Why is it so important to understand programming? Because as I said earlier, we need to start thinking like a compiler, not a human. It will later help us avoiding mistakes. Okay, let's start doing some serious stuff. If we want to write anything out to the users of our programs or respond to their actions, we need to use mostly something what is called libraries. When we talk about library in programming, we are thinking about many tools that we can use to achieve our goals. We will explore many of the tools in the upcoming lessons. So, that tools are some kind of toys that we can play with. So they will help us creating our programs faster. Sure thing is that also we can create libraries, but that topic is a bit advanced. There are many libraries that we can use for free. Some of them are on that website. You can find many others using search engine, like for example Google. Okay, but how to use the library? If we want to use the library, we have to write hash and the word include, which means we are adding library. Then add angle brackets, less than, greater than signs. Between angle brackets, so here, we can use the name of our library. We will use IO stream, which stands for input output stream. Let's note that if you want to note something in our program, well, in our source code, and we don't want it to be interpreted by compiler, we can use the comment signs, which allow us to comment our program. // and I can now write something like IOStream stands for input output stream, and this thing is one line comment, so everything behind here and everything in next line, so for example here or that line, is again interpreted by the compiler. Okay. There is one more way of using comments. /**, which is that small star here, right? And here we can write many comments in many lines. And now if we want to close that comment, we have to use the asterisk and then \. Now as we can see, that text is not being colored by our IDE. Okay. So that way it let us commenting many lines at once. But you might be like, hey, why do I need things like that? Well, comments are really very useful. It's a good idea to comment what our code is doing. Believe me, when you start writing programs that will be over 200 lines long or even longer, you won't be able to memorize everything. You might also write programs and leave them for about 1-3 months or maybe longer, because you will have, for example, holidays, or you just need to look into your code. When you come back to your code to upgrade it or maybe extend it a bit, believe me, without comments it's like a nightmare. Okay, so in situations like that, comments will help you remind what you had programmed. Also, remember that when you start programming with others, they won't be able to understand everything that you wrote. So it's a good idea to make it easier for them, because they will be your teammates, not enemies. Okay, let's go back to the library that we have just included. Let's remove that comment here also. So let's back here. And this is basic C++ library, which allow us, as it says, right, for to input, which means putting something into our program, and output, which means putting something out of our program. Okay, now I will create something what is called a function. Okay, here we have function. And what is function? Function, as the name suggests, is something that is created to function, right? So this function, as we can see, is called like what? Like main. This function goal is to be invoked, executed always as first, always as main. This is a special function that needs to be created in every program. Here we have also parentheses, brackets, right, which are hit here to declare parameters, but we'll talk about it later, not now. After it, we have two curly brackets. First, the opening one, and it is the beginning of our function, and the last curly bracket, closing one, and it is the end of our function. Okay, and that thing between that curly bracket is called the body of the function. our program will start invoking instructions, orders from this function, starting from the opening curly bracket, and it will finish on the closing curly bracket. So I write instruction in the body of our function, cout less than signs, quote, this is test, and the semicolon. And that instruction is ordered for our PC, and it of course must be followed. Let's figure out what that instruction is doing. As we can see here, we have got something like cout. Cout stands for console output. Okay. And after it, we have two angle brackets, less than signs. As we can see, that signs are pointing to what direction? To the cout, right? To the console output. So it means that everything after that angle brackets will be sent to the console output. In our situation, it will be what? It will be the text inside quote signs. Quote signs are reserved for sequence of characters which are shortly called strings. So since now every text will be called by us strings. Okay. At the end of every instruction, we have to add semicolons. And why is that so? Well, we can write programs also like that, for example. Let's do that way. For example, that way, right? Or we can write it another way. For example, we can do it, let's remove it, that white characters. We can do it that way also. So it can be almost in one line, but here we have a comment, so it's not working. For example, I will remove that comment for a second. And as we can see, we can almost write everything in one line, right? And if we had more than one instruction, it would be hard for our compiler to decide what to do, right? Okay. And that semicolons at the end of instructions allows the compiler to interpret our programs always right. And as you have probably already noticed, white characters like space, tab, enters are not interpreted by compilators. It means we should write programs clearly, which means like that. Just look how do I write programs during all lessons and try to do it the same way. So your code will be easy to understand for you and other people. Our program still won't be able to run now because that cout thing is inside a namespace. What is namespace? Well, namespace is a space where we can store functions and other things connected with programming, and we can name this space. That's why it's called namespace. Because it's a space which has a name. Okay, namespaces are used in order to avoid situations where, for example, two programmers are going to make two programming elements with the same names. if you want to use the cout element, we have to say from which namespace is that element. So cout is from the std namespace, which stands for standard. Now we have to add 2 colons in order to use programming elements from that space. Now our program will be compiled. As you can see, it's working well. However, using that std namespace every second for each element like cout from that space might be a bit tiring, right? That's why we can say after including iostream something like using namespace std. Now we don't need to use that thing here. And our program, as you can see, is still working well. Okay, that's all in this lesson. All that informations here were total basics of C++ language. If you have any questions, feel free to ask on our board on the video-courses-online.com website. Thank you, everyone.